We can 100% learn from the mistakes of other people when it comes to fight sports. And in particular, today we're looking at 3 massive knockouts from 3 high-level fighters. And we're gonna go, what did they do wrong? And how could they have corrected their mistake? And from that, we're gonna learn exactly how not to get KO'd in these enormous, spectacular ways. The very first clip that we are going to be looking at is none other than one of the best defensive fighters in the kickboxing world ever, Giorgio Patan. But he's the one getting knocked out. And it's very important to mention, or to remember at least, that a tiny little lapse in judgment for 1 split second can equal a KO. Does this make Giorgio less of an amazing defensive fighter? No, absolutely not. The guy's had over 100 fights. He got lost really just twice, and they both happen to be in big, spectacular fashion. Still a defensive genius. And the funny thing is, a couple people on my channel, because I have my defense course coming out in 1 week, a couple people have said, Gabriel, don't mean to be offensive, but Robin van Roosmalen knocked you down twice. And does that really make you an expert? Do you get to talk about defense and be somebody who's like, oh yeah, I can teach this to everybody else? Absolutely. Everybody, even somebody like Muhammad Ali, who is considered a defensive genius, even they get knocked down. Tiny little lapse in judgment. So what we want to do here is we want to look at these mistakes and go, oh, we understand what they did, understand how small the margin for error is, and then go, hopefully after watching this, I will not allow this to happen to me because I know I have to be on point all the time. So we are looking at Giorgio Patan fighting Superbon. Now we see Giorgio take the initial round kick. He's standing there, he does a great job, he gets that nice cross block. Fantastic way to deal with it. Yes, the forearms are going to take a little bit more damage than maybe catching or fading back, but it's a great way, it's a very safe way to deal with a kick. Then he goes for his counter shot, then he sees another kick come. He tries for the fade back, but misjudges the distance. Now, why does that happen with somebody who's so good like him? Could be he was just, at this point here, he comes back, he blinks for a split second, he continues and he realizes that, oh, it's too late. Could be as simple as that. And that's probably what it is, because this guy does not make many errors. But what he does do incorrectly is the hand that is holding the back of the head when you do your fade back, it was too low. And that means now the kick is coming, he's like, oh, okay, I didn't get my head out of the way, and he gets caught. Too low or too far back. Either of those is really bad. When you do your fade backs, me from an orthodox stance, when I do my fade back, I want to keep this at the front of my head and up high enough. I'm trying to keep this arm here. This one comes down, so I have the counterbalance motion. The shoulder stays tight. I tip back and I keep myself protected here. But again, like Giorgio did, if it's a little low and a little far back and you misjudge the distance, the kick hits here, before you have a chance to clear it, you're going to take that big knockdown. Tao and Chai landed this on, I believe, somebody named Sean Clancy in 1FC. He misjudged the distance on the fade back. Very dangerous. If you are going to play around with this fade back, make sure you understand the basics of it. Hip pushing forward will help you lever your head back a little bit faster. This hand stays up. Other one acts as the counterbalance. Possibly a little step to help create more distance. And you can get yourself to this position without getting caught. And we're not here to criticize Giorgio, we're here to learn from him, learn from his little mistake. He's really only made a couple in his whole career, and that is amazing. Still, in my opinion, one of the best defensive fighters of all time. Next, we're going back to an old school K1 Max fight when one of the most exciting fighters of that era, Mike Zambiti, fought somebody named Kid Yamamoto, who was out of Japan. Now, as we get on in my defense course, we start off and we learn initially, okay, how do we block shots? But then we learn how to turn that defensiveness into offensiveness. And a lot of that comes from knowing what openings you have and what the potential counters are. So what happens is we see Kid Yamamoto out of his southpaw stance go initially with the jab. Now, Mike Zambiti is a specialist at dropping his head to the outside and boom, coming with the big overhand. He waits for that initial motion off the jab, times it, and as Yamamoto comes forward, he eats the big overhand. Mike Zambiti just gets his head to the outside. Beautiful timing, beautiful overhand shot, and just a devastating KO. What we want to remember as we are moving forward offensively is to close off all defensive holes. So what Yamamoto does incorrectly is he, number one, throws this hand and has a big disconnect between shoulder and chin, and number two, his other hand is very low. So now from here, it doesn't really matter if it's a left hook, possibly a straight punch, an overhand, all of them are gonna land. If I can learn to, okay, I'm gonna go first, I'm gonna throw my first shot and close off all possible attacks as best I can, and then if necessary, make the little adjustments, I will be so much safer. Again, easier said than done when we are in the middle of a fight and we're throwing shots out in a split second and we have to make these adjustments in that little moment. Very difficult to do. But as you guys are trying to develop your defense skills, keep in mind, it's not just defense when somebody's throwing, it's also defense as you are throwing. And leading with an attack exposes you. It does. It's just the nature of fight sports. From here, I can be pretty shelled up. I can be pretty protected. Once I go to throw something, I open myself up. And if this guy is savvy enough to get his head off the center line or parry and counter, whatever he might do, I need to recognize on this whole side I'm exposed. And on this side I'm exposed if I don't keep my hand tight to my head. So the lesson we learned from Yamamoto is on our offense, close off all those potential holes so big overhands like Zambo lands won't be so easy. The final massive KO that we are covering today is a flying knee from a UFC fight from a while ago. Now, I was looking for some flying knees and they're pretty much all the same, whether they're, this leg coming up or people jumping in the air and taking that scissor knee. What is the same every time is how the opponent responds. And in my course, I'm going to teach you how to block knees, how to block defensive knees. You do not want to have your head stay in position and do nothing with your hands. Just trying to block like this or trying to duck down is going to be terrible. And we see this guy for a split second go, oh, and then all of a sudden go, okay, no. And he leans just down into it. He does nothing to cover his head. There are a number of different steps you can take, basically all panic mode, where you're just like, oh, the knee's coming and I close off. Or maybe I fade back. And there are all these different steps, kind of like, okay, this is a decent option. This is a slightly better option, and then the best option. Again, we're going to cover all that in the defense course. Guys, remember, there's only 6 days left to get registered for that. And on March 25th, we start. Chapter 1 is released. It's a 5-week course where we go through pre-recorded calls and then into a live call. And then pre-recorded again and then into live. It's going to be interactive 5 weeks where you guys can follow along and we can have so much to learn. Make sure you get registered using the link down below, vargacombat.com. I think everybody is going to love this course. And I know defense is not the coolest thing in the world. It's not as awesome as throwing combos or big spinning kicks, but it is so important. So let's call it there. Those were 3 big KOs which we saw today. Hopefully you learned something from each. On the flying knee, you don't want to drop your head. You don't want to just keep your head in position. You don't want to reach out and then pull your hands back and have no defense. On anything offensive where you're leading, you want to close off the holes. And on the fade back, you want to make sure that you're protecting yourself from both sides so that if I misjudge distance, I'm a little millisecond behind that kick, at least I have some protection. Thank you for joining me, everybody. As always, train hard, and I will see you back here soon for another episode.